week 15 on its way tonight. But here's 5 tight ends you should start this week. The first one's Robert Tonyan of the Green Bay Packers. Tonyan, he's been on a roll of late with a touchdown in his last 4 games, and this week he's got a Saturday game. Remember, there's 2 Saturday games this weekend, and the Green Bay Packers playing one of them here versus the Carolina Panthers. And Tonyan, he's had double-digit fantasy points the last 4 weeks. He scored a touchdown in those last 4 games, like I said, and again this week versus Carolina, that gives up the 7th most fantasy points to tight ends. I think Robert Tonyan's going to find the end zone again and get about his 40, 50 yards and find the end zone. I think he's the second man now over there in Green Bay. It goes Adams and him as the top 2 receivers that Rodgers is looking to target, and he's a matchup problem for linebackers and safeties. So Tonyan again, I think he finds the end zone and he keeps the hot start going. The second tight end I'm looking to start this week's Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. Gesicki, he's been on a tear the last 2 weeks with over 23 fantasy points in both games. In week 13 versus a weak Cincinnati team, 9 catches, 88 yards and a touchdown. And then last week versus Kansas City, 5 catches, 65 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This week, it's going to be a tougher matchup versus the New England Patriots that give up the second least amount of fantasy points to tight ends. But I got to ride the hot hand. Him and Tua, surprisingly, they've connected now. And Tua's looking for Gesicki now over the last few games where he's got 17 targets in his last 2 games. And this week versus New England, I think he could find the end zone again. Even if he gets 30 or 40 yards, I think he's a good start. The third start's Jared Cook of the New Orleans Saints. Cook, he was a guy a few weeks ago I said to drop because he was virtually doing nothing. And now Cook, he's been on a little bit of a hot streak the last 2 games. In week 13, 3 catches, 28 yards, and a touchdown. And then last week versus Philly, 3 catches, 37 yards, and a touchdown. This week, he's got a pretty good matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs that give up 8th most fantasy points to tight ends. And this week, this is going to be a shootout. It's going to be a game where Taysom Hill, like last week versus Philly, I think he throws the ball a decent amount of times, and where the Saints are going to play catch-up once again. And I think Cook could find the end zone one more time this week, where he could go for 40 yards and find the end zone. Cook's available in 32% of leagues if you need a tight end to plug and play this week in your semifinal matchup. And I like him here as the third one. The fourth tight end that's a start this week's Rob Gronkowski of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Rob Gronkowski, he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end of late. Last week, 1 catch for 2 yards and a touchdown. But this week versus Atlanta, I think he's going to have a huge ball game as Gronk. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him find the end zone maybe twice in this one. Atlanta, they give up the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends. Brady and Gronk, this is the time of season where these guys lock in and they start getting going heading into the playoffs for this Buck team. And I think Gronk has a big game. Atlanta's defense is poor, and like I say, they got no one that could cover him over there in the linebacking core or safety, and I think Gronk finds the seam and the end zone once or twice. And the 5th and final tight end that I got as a start this week might be a surprise is Jordan Reed of the San Francisco 49ers. In my top 15 tight end rankings for the week, I got Reed at 14. I just like the matchup a lot versus the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys, they can't stop no one. A lot of guys have big games, and Jordan Reed, he's got a good track record versus the Cowboys in his career. And this week, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets 20 or 30 yards and finds the end zone. And that's a real productive day nowadays for what tight ends are doing in fantasy football. So that's 5 tight ends I'm looking to start here heading into week 15.